The number you stop seeing right after you meet the right person. You have been seeing a number, not once, not twice, everywhere. On clocks at specific hours. On receipts you almost threw away. On license plates in parking lots. On the page number of a book you opened at random. In the middle of the night when something pulled you out of sleep for no clear reason, and you reached for your phone, and there it was again. You started noticing it weeks ago, maybe months. At first it felt like coincidence. Then it felt like something more. Like a quiet presence at the edge of your awareness, showing up too consistently to ignore, too precise to dismiss, too persistent to explain away with logic. So you stopped ignoring it. You started paying attention. You started wondering what it meant, where it was pointing, what you were supposed to understand. And somewhere along the way, the noticing became part of your daily rhythm. You began to expect it, to feel it before you saw it. The number became a kind of companion, silent and faithful, appearing at the edges of ordinary moments, with a consistency that felt like intention. And then someone walked into your life, not with fanfare, not with the dramatic entrance you might have imagined. They arrived quietly, naturally, the way something fits when it was always supposed to fit. The way a door opens that you did not realize you had been standing in front of. The way attention you had been holding finally without announcement releases. And the number stopped. No final appearance. No farewell. It simply went quiet. And now you are sitting inside a silence you cannot quite name, wondering if the disappearance means something ended or if it means something finally arrived. Wondering if the quiet should comfort you or concern you. Wondering what it means when the thing that guided you through the searching simply stops. Here's what that silence actually means. The number was never meant to stay forever. It was doing a specific job. And the moment that job was finished, it stepped back. What you are feeling right now is not loss. It is completion. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why that number went quiet, and what begins now that it has. The signal that followed you. Before you can understand why the number disappeared, you need to understand what it was doing while it was there. Repeating numbers do not appear randomly. They appear in specific seasons of a person's life, seasons defined by inner movement, by transition, by searching, by the particular restlessness of someone who is becoming something they have not yet fully become. They appear in the in-between, in the space between who you were and who you are still learning to be. The number was not a destination, it was a compass. It appeared during a period when some part of you was oriented toward something you could feel, but could not yet see. A pull in a direction you could not name. A sense that something important was approaching, even when your outer life gave you no evidence of it. Even when the surface of your days looked ordinary and unchanged. Even when nothing around you seemed to confirm what something inside you already sensed. Compasses do not tell you what you will find. They tell you which way to face. They keep you oriented when everything around you feels disorienting, and they are most active when you are still in motion, still in the middle of the journey, still moving toward something that has not yet appeared on the horizon. Consider for a moment what your life looked like when the number first appeared. What was shifting inside you at that time? What you were longing for, even quietly, even without putting words to it. What felt incomplete, or open, or gently pulling. The number did not arrive by accident in that particular season. It arrived because that season required it. Because something in the deeper architecture of your path knew that you were entering a period of movement and wanted to make sure you did not lose your way inside it. That you would keep moving even when the path felt uncertain. That you would trust even when trust was difficult. The signal that followed you was not haunting you. It was accompanying you, walking beside you through a chapter that required guidance because you were not yet where you were going. That chapter had an end, and when it ended, the compass went still. But to understand why it stopped, you first need to understand something about how guidance actually works, and when it is designed to end. Why numbers appear when you are becoming. Carl Jung spent decades studying the relationship between inner states and outer events. He called it synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence between what is happening inside a person and what appears in the world around them. He observed that these coincidences did not happen at random times. They clustered around moments of deep inner transformation, around psychological turning points, around the edges of major change, around the threshold moments where one version of a person begins to give way to another, where the old self is not yet fully dissolved and the new self is not yet fully formed, and the space between them is charged with significance. The repeating number you kept seeing was not separate from your inner life. It was a reflection of it. It appeared because you were in a state of active becoming, a state in which something inside you was reorganizing, shifting, preparing for something that had not yet arrived in physical form. Something real was being assembled in the invisible, and the number was the visible trace of that invisible movement. There is a particular quality to this state. It feels like anticipation without a clear object, like readiness that has not yet found its moment, like standing at a door that has not yet opened, knowing that something is on the other side, not knowing exactly what. And yet the knowing is real. The anticipation is not imagined. Something genuine was approaching, and some part of you could already feel its weight before it arrived. Numbers appear inside this state because the psyche is highly receptive during transformation. Pattern recognition sharpens, attention deepens. The mind begins to notice things it might have walked past before. And in that heightened state of awareness, certain numbers begin to stand out with unusual frequency. Not because they appear more often in the world, but because you are more attuned to receiving them. The world was always offering them. You were finally ready to see them. The number was not showing you where to go. It was appearing because you were becoming the person capable of receiving what was coming. It was marking the fact that you were already on your way. The inner work was happening even when you could not feel it clearly, even on the days that felt like nothing was moving at all. It was the quiet confirmation that the process was real, even in the moments it felt invisible. And for most people living through this exact experience, that number is 1111. It is the signal of convergence, the marker that two separate paths are beginning to bend toward the same point. When 1111 follows you during a season of becoming, it is almost always pointing at one thing. Someone is on their way. Something is aligning that has not yet taken physical form. For some it arrives as a different sequence, but the meaning underneath stays the same. The number is tracking a convergence that has not happened yet, which means the number was not just a sign, it was a mirror. And here is the part most people miss completely. What it was reflecting was about to change the moment that convergence arrived. The moment someone arrives. There is a specific quality to meeting the right person that most people struggle to describe. It is not the feeling from films. It is not breathless or electric or immediately overwhelming. People often expect arrival to feel like a storm, but it rarely does. It feels more like weather clearing, like a background noise you had grown so accustomed to that you stopped noticing it, and then one day it stopped and the silence was almost louder than the sound had been. Like a tension you had been holding in your shoulders for so long it had become your normal posture, and then one afternoon, without deciding to, you let it go. Like the removal of something you had stopped being aware was there. The searching energy that lived in your body before, that constant low-frequency orientation toward something missing, begins to settle. Not all at once, not dramatically, but something underneath the surface quiets. Something that was always slightly forward-leaning, always slightly straining toward something not yet here, finds a place to rest. The body stops reaching. Something inside simply stays. You stop scanning. That inner vigilance that was always slightly alert, always slightly waiting, begins to soften. You find yourself in a conversation and realize you are fully there, not managing an impression, not calculating distance, not protecting something fragile, not running a quiet background process that monitors how you are being received. Just present in a way that does not require effort, in a way that feels new precisely because it is also ancient, because some part of you has been waiting to feel this for a very long time. Recognition does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as simple ease, as the absence of effort where effort was always required before, as the strange comfort of someone whose presence does not demand that you perform or explain or justify yourself. Someone around whom the exhausting inner management simply stops being necessary. Someone in whose company you experience something that is almost difficult to name because it is so unfamiliar. The feeling of being enough, exactly as you are, without adjustment. Something in you knew before your mind had language for it. The body registers arrival before the intellect can name it. And often the first sign is not a feeling rushing in. It is a restlessness finally going quiet. And something else happened in that moment. Something you may not have noticed consciously. The frequency you had been carrying for months began to shift. Why the number goes silent. Now you can understand the disappearance. The number was present because you were in motion towards something. It was accompanying a journey that had a specific destination, not a place, a person, a meeting, a moment of arrival that your life was quietly oriented toward, even when you did not know that was what you were moving toward, even when you thought you were simply living, simply getting through each day, simply waiting without knowing clearly what you were waiting for. Guidance works this way. It does not follow you everywhere indefinitely. It appears where it is needed. It intensifies when the path is unclear. It accompanies the searching, the becoming, the moving toward. It is most present in the space between where you are and where you are going. It fills the gap between the longing and the arrival. But the moment you arrive, the pointing stops. Think of it this way. If you are navigating toward a destination and you reach it, the navigation ends. Not because something went wrong, because something went right. The system completed its function. The signal is no longer needed because the destination has been reached. You do not keep following directions to a place you are already standing inside. You do not need a compass once you are home. The number going silent is not the withdrawal of guidance. It is the confirmation of arrival. The silence is the signal. It is the spiritual equivalent of the compass needle settling because you are finally facing the direction you were always meant to face. The needle does not spin when you are lost. It rests when you are found. And that resting, that perfect stillness after so much motion is not emptiness. It is precision. The absence you are feeling is not emptiness. It is the particular fullness of having arrived somewhere real after a long time of moving toward it. The unfamiliarity of the silence is simply what it feels like to stop traveling, to put down the map because you are no longer between places. But there is something underneath this that most people never look at, a fear that the disappearance might mean something else entirely. The difference between endings and completions. Not every disappearance means the same thing. Some signs stop appearing because something collapsed, because a path closed, because a chapter ended without resolution and the energy around it dissipated. These endings carry a particular quality, a flatness, a sense of something unfinished going quiet rather than concluded, a hollow feeling in the place where the sign used to be, a silence that feels like absence because it is absence, because something withdrew rather than completed. What you are experiencing is different. A completion feels different from an ending. It carries a quality of rest rather than loss, of resolution rather than absence. When something completes, there is often a moment of stillness that feels almost too quiet, because you have been moving for so long that stopping feels unfamiliar. The stillness itself can feel alarming simply because you are not accustomed to it. You have been in motion for so long that rest feels like something is wrong, when in truth it means everything went right. That unfamiliarity is what you are sitting inside right now. You spent weeks, maybe months, in a state of active searching and active receiving. The number was part of that rhythm. It was woven into your daily experience. You noticed it, you felt something in response to it. You carried it with you as a quiet confirmation that you were on your way. And now the rhythm has changed, and the change feels strange even though it is good. Even though the strangeness is actually the feeling of something working exactly as it was meant to. The disorientation of completion is real, but it is not the same as the disorientation of loss. Ask yourself this: in the silence where the number used to appear, is there anxiety or is there peace? Is there the hollow feeling of something lost, or the full feeling of something settled? Does the silence feel like a door that closed, or like a room you finally walked into? Does the space where the number used to be feel empty? Or does it feel inhabited by something that did not need a sign because it had already arrived? The answer to that question will tell you everything about what kind of disappearance this is. If the person now in your life brings a sense of ease that was not there before, the number did not leave because something ended. It left because something completed. And if you look closely at what changed inside you when this person arrived, you will find something that confirms it was always a completion, not an ending. What your nervous system already knows. The body keeps the score long before the mind writes the story. Before you had language for what was shifting, before you could articulate what felt different, your nervous system was already registering the change. The body is an extraordinarily precise instrument for detecting relational safety, for sensing coherence, for recognizing when the searching can stop. It has been tracking this longer than your conscious awareness has. It noticed before you did. It knew before you had words for the knowing. The repeating number was, in part, a mirror of your internal state. Not entirely, but significantly. Numbers appear with heightened frequency during periods of inner activation. When the psyche is alert, when attention is sharpened by longing or transition, the mind notices patterns with greater intensity. The number was not just out there in the world waiting to be noticed. Your internal state was tuned to a frequency that made it visible. The signal and the receiver were always in relationship. And this is where most people misread their own silence. They assume the quiet means the connection broke. It is the opposite, and the next part explains why. When that internal activation begins to settle, the pattern recognition naturally softens. The vigilance that was scanning for signs relaxes, and the numbers that appeared so frequently during that heightened state begin to appear less, because the state that was amplifying your attention to them has shifted. The instrument has been recalibrated, not broken, not abandoned, recalibrated to a new frequency, a quieter one, a frequency that no longer needs to scan because it has found what it was scanning for. This is not a rejection of the spiritual dimension of what you experienced. It is the recognition that inner and outer are not separate. What appears around you is always in conversation with what is happening within you. The outer world is not indifferent to your inner state. It responds to it. It reflects it. It mirrors it back with remarkable precision if you are paying attention. And when the within changes, the without responds in kind. When the frequency of searching resolves into the frequency of arriving, everything that was calibrated to the search goes quiet. Your nervous system recognized arrival before your conscious mind could name it, and in recognizing it, it began to let the searching rest. The number faded because the inner frequency that had been drawing it into your awareness had changed into something more settled, more grounded, more at peace, something that no longer needed external confirmation because it had found internal resolution. But there is a deeper layer still, one that reaches beneath psychology into the structure of the connection itself. Synchronicity and soul contracts. There is a concept that appears across multiple spiritual traditions in different forms, but with a consistent core idea. That certain encounters are not accidental, that certain people are connected before they meet in physical form, at a level that exists beneath ordinary awareness. That some meetings are less like beginnings and more like rememberings. Jung spoke of the meaningful arrangement of events that cannot be explained by cause and effect alone. Coincidences that carry too much precision to be random, that arrive at exactly the moment they are needed, that feel less like chance and more like design. Hermeticism speaks of correspondence between planes of existence, the idea that what happens above is reflected below, that the visible world is always in conversation with invisible structures. Ancient traditions speak of agreements made before incarnation. They describe souls that recognize each other not because they have met in this lifetime, but because they have known each other at a level that precedes this one. The recognition is real, because the connection is real. It simply predates the meeting. Soul contract is the language many people use for this. The idea that certain connections carry a weight and a quality of recognition that ordinary social encounters do not. That there is something in certain meetings that feels less like introduction and more like reunion. Less like beginning and more like continuation. Less like two people finding each other, and more like two people returning to something that was always already between them. That when these connections activate, something in the deeper structure of a person's life shifts. Old patterns begin to release. Old identities begin to soften. Something that was held in tension begins to resolve. The arrival of the right person does not just add something to a life. It reorganizes it, quietly, at the level of foundation. The number that accompanied your journey toward this person was connected to the timing of this contract. It was present during the period when the contract was moving from latent to active, from something held at a deeper level into something about to surface in your lived experience. The number was the visible trace of an invisible movement toward activation. Its disappearance marks the activation. The contract is no longer approaching. It has arrived. The preparation phase is complete. What begins now is not the journey toward the connection, but the journey within it. Which naturally raises the question, if the old guidance has completed its work, what comes next? What happens to guidance after arrival? One of the fears underneath the disappearance of the number is this. If the guide has gone quiet, how will you know what to do next? If the signs have stopped, how will you navigate what comes now? The number felt like a hand on your shoulder in the dark, and now the hand has lifted, and the dark feels different without it. Quieter, less mapped, less confirmed. Guidance does not disappear. It changes form. The signs that accompanied you during a period of searching were calibrated to that period. They were oriented toward movement, toward preparation, toward arrival. They spoke the language of transition. They appeared in the frequency and form most useful for someone still finding their way, someone who needed confirmation that they were moving and that the movement was right, someone who needed to be reminded, in the middle of uncertainty, that something was still pointing forward. But you are not in that same place anymore. You have crossed a threshold. And the guidance that meets you on the other side of a threshold speaks a different language than the guidance that helped you reach it. A traveler arriving in a new country needs different tools than the ones that served them on the journey there. The compass that helped you find the destination does not stop being useful simply because you arrived. It transforms into something else, something that no longer points toward but instead confirms within. New synchronicities will begin to appear, not as markers pointing you toward something not yet found, but as confirmations of presence, as signs that you are on the right path not because the path is ahead of you, but because you are walking it, as quiet acknowledgments that the connection forming around you is real, and is right, and is exactly what the long preparation was building toward. The difference in feeling is subtle, but unmistakable once you know what to listen for. The numbers you begin to notice now, if you notice them, will carry a different quality, a different emotional resonance. They will feel less urgent, less searching, more like acknowledgement, like a quiet yes from something larger than your conscious mind, less like an arrow and more like a nod, less like a reminder to keep going and more like a confirmation that you are already where you need to be. Pay attention to what appears in the weeks ahead, not with the intensity of someone searching for a destination, with the openness of someone learning the language of a new chapter. The signs will come. They will simply sound different now. And the first thing you will notice about this new language is how different it feels from everything you were receiving before. The quiet that feels like home. There is a particular kind of stillness that follows arrival. It is not the stillness of emptiness. It is not the flatness of numbness or the silence of disconnection. It is a different quality entirely. The stillness of something that has been searching for a long time and has finally found what it was looking for and does not need to keep moving. The stillness of a river that has reached the sea. The stillness of a question that has finally received its answer and no longer needs to be asked. You may have spent so long in motion that stillness felt unfamiliar at first, even suspicious. You were so accustomed to the restlessness of searching, to the background hum of waiting and wondering and orienting toward something not yet here. So when it finally went quiet, you wondered if something was wrong, wondered if you had somehow stopped caring, or stopped feeling, when in truth you had simply stopped needing. When in truth the engine that was running to keep you searching had finally, mercifully, been allowed to rest. Nothing is wrong. What you are feeling is the texture of no longer searching. It is the sensation of being where you were always pointed, of having arrived at the place the compass was always indicating, and finding that it is real and it is good, and it does not require any more seeking. That the destination after all this time is exactly as real as the longing that was pulling you toward it. That the longing was not too much to ask. It was exactly the right amount to ask because it was leading you somewhere worth the asking. This quiet is not absence. It is presence. The fullest kind. The kind that does not announce itself loudly because it does not need to. It simply settles into the ordinary moments of a life and makes them feel at last like enough. The morning cup of coffee. The unremarkable Tuesday. The conversation that does not need to go anywhere because being in it is already the point. The ordinary in this new light begins to feel extraordinary. Not because it changed, because you arrived inside it differently. Rest inside it. You have earned the right to stop looking, and when you are truly still inside it, something else becomes possible. The ability to look back and finally see the whole picture. When the signs were always about this. Look back. Not with nostalgia and not with analysis. Just look back at the thread of signs and numbers and moments of quiet recognition that led you to where you are now. The patterns that appeared when you were in the middle of transformation. The synchronicities that felt like confirmation without being fully explainable. The number that followed you through a period that felt uncertain and sometimes difficult, and always oriented towards something you could feel, but not yet see. Look at the whole of it, not just the pieces. Now you can see where it was pointing. Every appearance of that number was a stitch in a thread that was always leading here. Every moment you noticed it and felt something shift in your attention, something in you was being oriented, prepared, made ready for a meeting that was already written into the structure of your path. None of it was noise. All of it was signal. Even the moments that felt like confusion were part of a coherence you simply did not yet have the vantage point to see. The confusion was not a sign that you were lost. It was a sign that you were still in the middle of something too large to see clearly from the inside. The signs were never random. They were never meaningless. They were the language of a journey that was coherent from the beginning, even when it did not feel that way from the inside. Even when you were confused, or tired, or uncertain whether you were moving in the right direction. Even on the days when the number appeared and you looked at it and felt nothing but the weight of still waiting. The coherence was there, even in the heaviness. The thread was holding even when you could not feel it. You were always moving in the right direction. The thread held even when you could not feel it. The journey completed even when completion seemed far away. And the person now in your life is not a coincidence. They are not an accident or a lucky encounter. They are the answer to a question your whole path was asking. A question that was asked across weeks and months of signs and searching and becoming. And knowing that, you can begin to understand something about what comes next, and the new signs that are already beginning to form. The new language that begins now. A new chapter carries a new vocabulary of signs. The synchronicities of searching look different from the synchronicities of presence. During the searching phase, signs often feel urgent, frequent, almost insistent. They appear to keep you moving, to confirm your orientation, to sustain you through uncertainty. They carry the energy of something that needs your attention immediately, something that is trying to make sure you do not miss the direction you need to go. They have the quality of a hand on your arm, redirecting, of a voice saying, "This way, keep going, do not stop." During the presence phase, signs shift in quality. They become quieter, more subtle, more confirmatory than directive. Less about pointing you forward, and more about affirming that where you are is where you belong. They carry the energy of recognition rather than instruction, of yes rather than this way, of a nod rather than a pointing finger. They do not arrive to move you, they arrive to confirm you, to let you know that where you have landed is exactly where you were meant to land. You may begin to notice new numbers, new patterns, new small moments of coincidence that carry a sense of acknowledgement rather than urgency. A song that plays at exactly the right moment, as if it were placed there for you specifically. A phrase you encounter twice in the same day that speaks precisely to something you were privately thinking. A feeling of unexpected peace that arrives without a clear cause. A moment of beauty that seems to appear just as you needed it, as if the world wanted you to notice that it was still in conversation with you. These are the signs of a different kind of guidance. One that no longer needs to point you toward your destination, because you are already there. One that speaks the language of confirmation, of presence, of the quiet ongoing conversation between your inner life and the larger pattern you are woven into. These signs do not demand your attention, they invite it. And in that invitation is something the searching phase signs could not offer. Rest. Learn this new language with patience. It is quieter than what you were listening to before. It asks less of your attention and more of your trust. It requires you to be still enough to receive something that does not announce itself, but it is no less real. And it will accompany you through everything that comes next, because once you understand that a new language has begun, the final piece becomes clear, the one that changes how you see everything that came before. You are always going to find each other. This is the part that is difficult to hold without something giving way inside. You are always going to find each other. Not because fate is rigid, not because the future is fixed and free will is an illusion, but because certain connections are written at a level deeper than the surface decisions of daily life. Because certain people carry a resonance that was always meant to meet yours, in this particular form of life, in this particular time. Because some threads are woven into the fabric before the fabric takes its shape. Because some meetings are not the product of circumstance, but the resolution of something arranged at a level most people never see. The searching you did was not wasted. Every moment of it was part of the becoming. Every day of waiting was a day of being shaped into the person capable of receiving what was coming. The waiting was not punishment. It was preparation. The long seasons of uncertainty were not mistakes or detours or evidence that something was wrong with you. They were the process by which you became the person capable of recognizing what arrived. They were the chapters that made this chapter possible. Without them, you might have met this person and not yet been ready to see them clearly. The searching made the finding possible. The number that followed you was not there to make you anxious. It was not there to confuse you or to raise false hopes or to keep you endlessly waiting. It was there to sustain you through a becoming that required more of you than you sometimes felt you had. On the days you doubted, on the nights the silence felt like absence rather than waiting, on the mornings that felt hollow in a way you could not explain to anyone. It kept appearing because something in the structure of your path knew you needed the reminder that you were still held, still accompanied, still moving toward something real. That the becoming had a destination, that the searching had an answer. It stayed until it was no longer needed, and then it stepped back, as a good guide always does when the journey reaches its end. Not with ceremony, not with announcement, not with a final dramatic appearance to mark the transition. Simply and quietly, the way all completed things return to stillness. The way a candle is no longer needed once the sun has risen. You are not still searching. You are no longer waiting. Something that was approaching for a long time has arrived. And the silence left behind by the number is not empty. It is full. It is the fullness of a story reaching the moment it was always building toward. The fullness of an answer finally meeting the question that called it into being. The fullness of two people who were always going to find each other, finally standing in the same place at the same time. The number did its work. Now something new begins. And this time, you do not begin it alone.